Mick Lynch has been speaking truth to power again. Here he is on LBC, blowing apart the government's narrative on inflation.
The government says that doing that, to raise wages by the extent to which you want or that you're suggesting, would be inflationary. It would drive up the cost of living and therefore effectively negate the pay increase. What do you say to that?
Well, it's patently not true, is it? There's this myth put around by the powers that be, by the media, their friends in the Daily Mail, the Telegraph, the Times, the LBC, perhaps.
Institute for Fiscal Studies.
Yes,
there's quite a lot of experts saying this.
The majority of people in this country have not had a pay rise for 3 years against inflation. Real terms pay rise, real wages, as it's often called in economics. And for many millions of people in the public sector, and that ranges from the armed forces through the police, ambulance workers, healthcare workers, teachers, and all sorts of people, have not had a pay rise since the Cameron-Osborne government. So it cannot be the case that the low paid in this country, the people below 40,000, let's say, just as a mark, are responsible for rising prices. Rising prices are created by profit. So the big shots in this economy, the Rishi Sunaks, billionaires, and others that live on dividend and shareholdings, are raking in money. We have more billionaires than we've ever had in this society. The super rich have never been richer. So what's responsible for price rises is the accumulation of profit in our economy. And it cannot be that a hospital porter is responsible for pushing up the price of petrol and the price of gas and the price of electricity.
But there are respected economists saying that exactly is the case, that if you give millions of people money, they spend more money, prices go up. That's what they're saying.
There are other economists from another school, the Keynesian school, that say that is completely and utterly wrong. It depends who you read and what you believe.
So you reject that completely?
If you believe in Tory politics, you'll believe that workers are responsible for a price-wage spiral. It's not the case. Wages are chasing prices. Prices are not chasing wages, because virtually everybody below the top strata is poorer now than they were 10 years ago. So it cannot be that the low-paid are creating price increases.
Do you see this as effectively them trying to... So it strikes me as what you're saying is the government is trying to scapegoat the low-paid workers for the price rises that everyone is experiencing.
Well, as a part of that, the government is trying, on behalf of their friends in the city and the people that own the means of production in society, to keep wages low. If you keep wages low, you extend and put more value into profit. And that's exactly what's happening. So if you work in the private sector, in a fulfillment centre for Ocado, for DHL, for Amazon or one of those people, you're really struggling and you need a pay rise. And the cost of living problem will be addressed through the pay packet, not through doles from the government every now and again, which are, of course, temporary. Pay rises tend to be permanent, and that's what we need in this society. We need lower pay transformed into reasonable pay.
He nailed it again. He always nails it. He never, ever lets us down when it comes to making those arguments. He says wages are chasing prices. Prices are not chasing wages. And I think that's such an important point. You know, it's not the case that prices are being driven by these greedy workers. It's that workers are asking for a little bit more money because the prices are going through the roof. We can show you a couple charts to prove that. This is from Sky News. So here the thick line shows how real weekly earnings have changed since 2000. As you can see, weekly wages rose steadily from 2000 to 2008, from £400 to £480. If they had continued on that trajectory, they would now be £600 per week. So that would be the average wage for everyone. But what actually happened? Well, after the financial crash of 2008 and the austerity that followed, wages collapsed, and they had only just recovered to 2008 levels last year, and they're going to fall again this year. So we're being told that workers demanding wage rises has caused inflation, but it turns out wages haven't even risen. Make it make sense. Of course, it doesn't make sense. Inflation is being driven by increased energy prices and increased profits, not our measly pay packets. Or at least, not by most of our pay packets. This chart is pretty mind-blowing. It's from Bloomberg, and it puts the lie to any idea that in this cost of living crunch, we're all in it together. What the lines show are the percentage increase in pay for different people according to where they fall in the income spectrum. The blue line represents the top 1% of earners who, surprise, surprise, have had a bigger increase in pay than anyone else this year. Their pay rise was 9.1%. That's above the 8% inflation. In contrast, every other group got pay offers below inflation. The lowest increases were for the lowest paid. With inflation at 8%, the poorest workers in Britain are getting a raise of less than 2%.
I think that there's a reasonable case to be made that when you have a political class from Keir Starmer all the way to Liz Truss, hell-bent on ignoring the cost of living crisis that's before their very eyes and the solutions that are needed to deal with it. You've got prices going up, not just of household energy bills, but commercial fuel, which then in turn pushes up the price of food. You've got huge disruption to grain supply, which again, driving up the cost of food. And you've got landlords putting up their rents over and above inflation, sometimes as high as 15, 20%. What option are you leaving people in order to advocate for their own interests? Yes, you've got the power of organized labor. And that's where people like Mick Lynch are really important, not simply because he's such a gifted media performer. And of course he is. I mean, I think he must have been a postman in another life because he always delivers. But because the point that he's making is that the only solution you have as a worker is collective bargaining. That is the one power you have to better your pay or better conditions. But for lots of people, that's not going to be an immediate option for them, either because the trade union movement has taken historic hits, the attacks of Margaret Thatcher, the lack of will amongst the new Labour government to repeal anti-trade union legislation, the fact that, yes, you do have union membership going up, but that sense of political education, organising know-how isn't quite there yet. A trade union isn't always an option for people. And then you've got people who are just simply not part of the workforce for whatever reason. They're unemployed, they're long-term unemployed, or maybe they're students. I think that for those people who are still having to deal with the cost of living, it would not surprise me one bit if we did see riots in the near future. I mean, just thinking about the area that I live in, I was talking to the guy who runs the corner shop, and he was showing me the receipts for his stock orders. And he was like, look, everything's gone up by a third or a quarter. What am I supposed to do? And so that means he's having to put his prices up in an area which, yes, has got a lot of gentrification, but it's still got really high levels of child poverty. It's got higher than average proportion of people living in poverty in multiple occupancy homes, and also higher than average unemployment. What are those people supposed to do? I come out my house and turn the corner and I see the line to the food bank getting longer every single day. And I mean, visually, it is getting longer every single day. And this is in the summer. This is before the October price cap goes up again, potentially leaving households vulnerable to average energy bills of £3,000 a year. I mean, when you couple total political abandonment with those kinds of economic conditions, I wouldn't be surprised if we had riots. And in my opinion, they would be entirely morally and politically justified.